Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Interviewing Wednesdays. It's September 28th, 2022. Please note this event is being recorded and is currently live on Facebook. The recording will be on the Career DFW Facebook page and the Career USA YouTube channel for others to view in the future. By participating in this event, you give consent for your name and picture to appear. Please note that any comments you put in the Zoom chat window will not appear in the recording. For those people who are on Zoom, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please just open up the Zoom chat window, put your questions in there. For those watching on Facebook, just put your questions into the comment field. We're monitoring both feeds. Also, if you'd like to network with everybody else who's on the call, you're welcome to put your contact information in the Zoom chat window so you can connect with other people who are on the call today. Well, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jeff Morris. Back in 2008, I started a website called careerdfw.org, a website to help everybody who's unemployed in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. About 10 years ago, I started a second website, careerusa.org, to help those around the United States. I have written a book called What I've Learned About Your Job Search You May Not Know. It is available on Amazon, or if you see me in person. Since 2007, I've been facilitating and leading the North Dallas Plano Career Focus Group. The group's been around since the late 1990s. I'll tell you about our upcoming program that we have coming up this Friday morning at the end of this session. And since 2017, I've been a member of the practice interview team. You'll hear more about that in just a moment. Well, to get us started, before we get to our session of the day, I'm going to let Walt talk about the Interview Success Workshop. Good morning, good afternoon, Walt.
Oh, good morning, afternoon to you, Jeff. And hello, everyone. Walt Glass here, Interview Success Coach. I love to help you practice interviewing in a very informal environment to increase your skills and knowledge for a successful job interview. The workshop is free. You have to be registered to attend, but it is informal. This is one where we can talk about a job. You know, the interview is more a discussion about a job than it is an interrogation. How do we do that? How do we sell ourselves? Just what is it when we talk about ourselves? And I have a three-legged stool called the I am, I do, I help model. I developed this back in 2000 when I screwed up an interview really badly. So I figured out I better do something to pay attention to this. So I've offered this a couple of times during my job search, and now that I'm retired, it is my volunteer activity. What is it about the interview that's special? Well, we want to differentiate ourselves. We want to be very positive. We want to have a great attitude. Well, how do we have that? Well, we practice. Practice begins to get us from the point of, please God, help me answer these questions, to I'm looking forward and excited about a discussion and talking about this role, the expectations, and how I can help them in this particular endeavor. So send me an email. The QR code on the screen will start an email. You have to just put in a couple of pieces of information about where you found out about it and what date that was, and send me a phone number, and I'll be glad to send you back availability. I always schedule 9 to 11 on Tuesday morning Central Time in order to have a specific time, but I also, depending on demand, can do other times as well. I don't do more than 2 people at a time. I can do 1 or 2 people at a time. And I would love to have you sign up, register, and enjoy learning. Put your learning hat on, not your mock interview hat. We're going to discuss some things. You're allowed to start over. You can pause and think for as long as you need to think of an answer. That's the workshop part of it. So come on down and join. So let's have a good time learning how to improve our skills with interviewing. I call it learning without squirming.
Thank you very much, Walt. Ron's not with us today. He's actually on vacation someplace. I think he's floating on a boat somewhere, if I'm not mistaken. But I'll talk about the practice interview team. Number one, it is totally free. You need to practice your interviewing skills. And the reason being is that your LinkedIn profile and your resume don't get you a job. They get you a phone call. How well you practice your interviewing skills, that's what will get you your next job. So their motto is practice early, practice often. What you need to do is pick out a resume, or pick your resume and a job description. It can be a job description that you'd like to have that you've never applied for yet, but you just want to practice. It can be the job description that you've already interviewed with them 2 or 3 times. And this is, you're that far into the process and you just want to perfect what you're doing beforehand. Just let them know, where you are in the interview process, resume and a job description, and you're scheduled 2 to 3 days out. And Ron will get the interview team together and they will pull 2 or 3 people who will go and interview you and get you prepared for your next interview. It is, they recommend sometimes it takes 3 to 5 times before you're really going to be good at what you do. They do record it, so you'll be able to get a recording. You'll get feedback. It's about a 45-minute interview, about a 15 or 20 minutes of feedback. And it's really valuable because when you go to an interview, for the most part, you don't get any feedback. Here you're going to get feedback. And these are all hiring managers, people who've hired people in the past. So reach out to dallaspitcrew.com, just send an email to dallaspitcrew@gmail.com, and they will get you scheduled for a practice interview. Now, the other thing you can do is a one-way interview. This is where the HR department sends you a link. You go on, you follow this link. It takes you to a computer program. The computer goes and asks you a question. There's nobody else there. You're supposed to come up with an answer within a certain period of time. Sometimes you can re-record it, sometimes you can't. And you and the camera, that's all there is. And you're talking to the camera. So if you'd like to schedule a one-way interview, we've got a software that's been donated to us. You can reach out to Walt Glass at walt_glass@yahoo.com and take his. You can reach out to me at txjmorr@yahoo.com and I can schedule it. Nobody will see this interview. Once you're done with it, Walt and I find out about it. We will then send you the link and you can go back and watch it. And you've got 15 or 20 days that you can go back and watch it after the interview, just to evaluate how well you did. So it's totally free. Just reach out to Walt or myself. Well, today we're going to talk about analyzing the job description, what you need to know about job descriptions, how to analyze the job description for clues regarding what you can do to help, and what do you do when there really isn't a job description? How do you prepare for that? So Mark McDonald and Walt Glass are the 2 people who are going to be talking about this today. This is pre-recorded. So if you have any questions, just put them in the chat window. Walt will be with us at the end and we'll get those questions answered for you.
And analyzing the job description, another great session from Walt and I about the final topic in the preparation series of the first 5 presentations. Now it won't go again. Let's try it one more. There we go. The first 5 sessions are all about preparing to interview. And so we're on session 5 of the preparation section. So there they are, recruiting, how to prepare, networking, star stories, video interviewing last week, and now analyzing the job description. And then next week, we start another series of 5, which is all about effective interviewing. So 5 to prepare, 5 for effectiveness, and then the last 3 are kind of additional special topics that build on all the information that came before, including how to handle difficult interviewers and their difficult questions and avoiding crashes. So that's what's coming up. All of these are available on the Career USA YouTube channel. That's where I go to take a look at them. I think they're also on Facebook, but I don't spend much time on Facebook. Jeff will tell you where to find them. So if there's a topic you see on this list that you'd like to focus on right now, you can go find those on the Career USA YouTube channel, and it'll be recent. It'll be in the last 3 months or 4 months. And so you can take a look at those. If you're curious about how to build rapport, you can go look at number 10 there. You can find it on the Career USA YouTube channel. All right. Okay, I'm going to kind of talk about the character of job description. So this is a pretty high level thing. Walt's going to get into actually analyzing them and how there are more details about how they're made. But I think it helps to understand just at a very high level, the character of a job description, what's the environment that's generating them, and this will explain why sometimes there's a gazillion requirements. It explains sometimes why they're very vague. It explains sometimes why you get a job description and they tell you, well, don't pay attention to the job description. You know, that's not really right. And you're going like, why would you give it to me if it's not right? But I'll cover that in my portion. And then Walt's going to go into a specific example of breaking down the job description and how to identify what is most important and how you should prepare for your interview. So this is still in the preparing the interview section. So typically, when you look at a job description, you're going to see 4 sections. And let's just focus on the first, before the first slash, okay? Because it'll be a job summary, then responsibilities and duties, then qualifications that you're supposed to have for the job, and then perhaps a preferred qualification section. Now, each of these sections go by different names, but typically you'll see 4 sections. Like for instance, the second there, it might say overview. Okay, that's the same as the summary. It might say responsibilities. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. Responsibilities and duties. Qualifications may be labeled technical skills, so on and so forth. You sometimes don't always have a preferred qualifications section. Now, the first thing to remember, and I heard Tony Bashir talk a couple of weeks ago, maybe last week, about resumes, and he said something that was so insightful, I committed to memory, and it explains a lot. It says resumes are not read, they're scanned. Okay, so you got to prepare your resume as if somebody, which is true, is only going to spend 10 seconds looking at it. So it's really important to remember that a job description is a corporate governance document. Okay, what that means is it captures the structure of the organization and the job titles, the official job titles, and the job and the pay ladder is all, the job descriptions are all built around these corporate governance ideas of equal pay, opportunity for promotion, pay directly associated with contribution, so on and so forth. So, and because it's a corporate governance document, producing a new job description or changing an existing job description can be an arduous challenge. So there's a lot of resistance, or let's say workarounds, where they'll take the document and use it because it's officially approved and it's in the structure and they don't have to go through any review to change it. But in reality, it's not exactly what they're looking for. They have other requirements. Now, sometimes, so the first 3 parts of this, the summary, the responsibilities, and the qualifications, are part of that corporate governance part. Okay, so those 3 sections are used by HR to grade the position, or said another way, they have a position that's a senior level position, and so it needs to have certain items in the job description, and those are captured in the summary, the responsibilities, and the qualifications. Okay. The 4th section is likely the only part that the current hiring manager is able to modify because it has no effect on the pay scale or grade. So you'll see things like master's degree preferred, but the job title is whatever it is, project manager 2. So that means they're not going to give you any money for a master's degree. That's what that means. Okay, it's a preferred requirement, but likely the hiring manager has put that in there. Okay, it has no effect on the grade and salary structure of the job. And they may have other tools and particular things, but the thing to know is that if this is the case, that it's a larger company, this is the only place the hiring manager gets to customize the job description, is in that preferred qualifications section. So it's not something to ignore. It might even be something to focus on. Let's keep going. Now, somebody asked about this, a very vague. This is a strategy actually, and I learned about this early in my career. I was when I first got promoted and to manage a group. We were hiring some people, and they asked me to review the job description. So I'm sitting there with HR reviewing the job description. I'm going, this is really vague. We should add this and this and this because that's what we're looking for. And they said, oh, nope, that's not what we want to do. We want to be very kind of vague. We want to cast as big a net as we can, and then after we catch a bunch of fish, we're going to sort them out afterwards. Okay, we don't want anybody turned away because there was some specific requirement they meet. They might be a great hire, so on and so forth. So this was their strategy, was just to collect up a whole bunch of people and then sort it out. Now other companies don't want to do that. They don't want to spend the time doing that. They only want candidates to self-select, and so they'll put a lot of detail in there and expect mostly to hold you to it. Okay, you just don't know, but that's why you'll see some very vague job description. Now also some companies believe you can be trained to do just about anything, and so they're really hiring for personality and fit, who you are. Walt will talk about this, and so they may have very vague and limited job descriptions as well, because they're really looking for the right personality and the right type of person, and what you've done, achieved is not as important to them as your motivation or your interest in working for their company. So that's another reason why they may not be very specific, and you'll kind of less experienced roles are usually less specific than more experienced roles, because new hires, new college graduates, or people young in their career don't bring a lot of experience with them. And so if you put a whole bunch of things on there, you're not really looking for that type of person. You're looking for a more senior person. Now, job descriptions are often out of date, written some time ago. And so they're not kept up to date because their corporate governance document, and it's a pain to get them changed. And when I say it's a pain, if you want to rewrite it, you got to get somebody from HR to do it. HR has to get it approved. It might have to go all the way up to the VP of HR. They'll spend some time figuring out how it fits into the job structure and the pay grade scale. And so it might take months to get this done. It can happen. It can happen, and I'll give you some examples here in a little bit. But most of the time, it won't happen until they find somebody who they believe meets their requirements. And then if a modification is required, they'll put in the effort to do that. And I've got several examples to share with you about that coming up. But mostly they'll grab what they got and run with it. Okay, they don't want to spend any time and effort reviewing or changing it. Now, so here's how this happens. The job description kind of grows and grows and grows over time as the age of the job description gets older and older. So, what I just said, it may not be true. Depends on the size of the company, really. They may allow the hiring manager with HR approval. It may not be that tough to add a few items. And so the list, they never take anything off. They just keep adding a few items at a time. And so I think a really detailed interview is a good indication that it was written some time ago and probably wasn't written by the current hiring manager and may not express the current priorities, meaning that the very first, requirement may not be the most important. It's buried in there somewhere. It may even be at the bottom, okay, because the most recent hiring manager added it to the list right at the bottom. So that's some things you got to watch out for. And so it makes analysis of the job description very important. It's not just saying, okay, well, these are the top 3 things that they put on their list, and that's what I'm going to focus on, because they may not be the top 3. They may be buried deeper down in the job description. Few job descriptions have been written by the current hiring manager. So this goes along with their age, right? And that can be a good question to ask at the beginning of the interview. So we have a whole section on openings and closings. and another section on asking questions. So I'm not going to get into this really deep, but just let me say it in case you get a chance to use it, is, right after you make your opening statement, you may ask this question, Mr. Hiring Manager, Mrs. Hiring Manager, did you write this job description? And if they say no, it was written sometime before, then you have an opening to say, well, what is most important to you for this role you're about to fill? So that's a really potential way to introduce the topic of gaining more information about what that current hiring manager is looking for. Okay, some jobs do not have a job description yet, and you may receive a JD for the correct pay grade and position title, but little else that is actually relevant to the job. So somebody asked about this as well, and this is how it happens. And I was kind of surprised the first time this happened in the pit crew, but it happens, I wouldn't say real often, but it does happen. It's usually for more senior level positions. And so they'll give you a job description and they'll say, this isn't really the job description, but what it is it has the correct title and the correct level or pay grade. Okay, and it may not even have the correct title, but it might, if it might be a senior accountant instead of a senior finance business analyst, and they're similar pay grade but different title. So you'll get a senior accountant when you're a senior business analyst, and they'll say, well, we're working on updating the job description. But that's how that happens. And so, you're going to look at all these requirements for accounting and say, well, I'm a business analyst, and so I know something about accounting, but it's not what I really do. Well, that's what's going on. They're just trying to, as they're going through the process probably of getting that position approved, and so they have attached this job description to that approval as an example of how, what the person would cost and the span and scope of their responsibility. And so that's what's going on. So don't let that throw you off. And it can, certainly it's an unusual situation, but that's what's going on. But what do you do when there's no job description? What do you do when you're being hired for an undefined role where you get to define it, or perhaps it's in the head of the hiring manager and they, you got to get it out of them. Perhaps the recruiter knows, but perhaps they don't. So really, you will encounter some vague situations. And so to improve your ability to address what their needs are without them being written down, and to improve your confidence and to shorten your job search, you are going to have to do your own research. And here's what I suggest, okay, is that you find job descriptions that were for similar roles with competitors. And this is a good idea to do all the time, okay, is you're looking for certain things, you should look at job descriptions that are put out by the competitors of your target companies. You should just kind of look at the whole environment for what you're looking for in adjacent industries and your industries as well. But it's doubly important when you don't have a job description to know what people are asking for in similar situations, similar corporate situations. And that can inform you what they might be asking for as well. So having target companies really helps there, because you can focus on those target companies when you don't have an opportunity queued up and limited time to prepare. And so work on your prioritized list of target companies and go searching for job descriptions that are close to what you'd like to do in case pops up with a job, a job available that has no job description yet. You can still prepare and talk with confidence about what you're able to do and how you're able to help. In this case, it would be companies in similar situations, but you're using that as a straw man for their opportunity. Informational interviews would be really helpful here to ask people what their challenges are when you're interviewing them in an informational interview. And we have a whole session, I think it's session 11 on target companies and informational interviews. So if you want to go watch that one from, it would have been in April, it would have been in March. If you go look on the Career USA channel in the March 2021, you'll see that's session 11, but that's how you can learn informally, I guess, through your contacts inside the company, what they might need and what's important to them. Is it safe to ask the interviewer if the company outsources their positions? Good question, Michelle. Yeah, recruiter, you should ask the recruiter. It's kind of a question about who's going to be your employer, right? It could be a professional employment organization. You could be employed directly with the company you're hiring. So that's a good question to ask the recruiter. Okay, now this is the important part. You're going to do this research and you don't have a job description, or you got a very vague job description. So you're going to have to make a leap. You're going to have to analyze and predict, kind of how you would help them. And you're going to put that in your opening statement. These are the ways I can help you. And you're going to list 2 or 3 ways that you believe you can help. But then you have to start asking questions. And it really starts with not the interview, but the recruiter. And hopefully there is a recruiter. But if there's not, whoever you're engaging with, you start asking questions about what their most important requirements are. So this is to confirm that what you found in your research is still valid, okay? And you likely may turn up some new things that weren't obvious from your research, but you're never going to know unless you ask, okay? Good practice in any interview, but especially if you don't have a job description, you're going to find out by asking. Ask everyone you interview with. If you go, if you have more than one person, you can ask every one of them, what are the most important priorities for this position? And what are the most important priorities from your perspective? And, what was it in my background that you believe will make the most impact here? That's a good way to draw out what they see in your background that's important to them. Got to find out what they're buying so you can address how you can help them. Walt will get into that a little more detail. Okay, here you go. Session 6 covers openings and closings and asking questions in session 8 and session 11, informational interviews. So I covered a lot right there. We've got sessions on these topics coming up. Okay, I got a little poll now. How close of a match to the job description would you need before you would pursue an opportunity? So please fill in that poll. And let's see, can I put them up on the screen for you guys on Facebook? Here they are. Here's your choices. So the question in my mind is, how close a match would there need to be for you to reach out to the recruiter for that position, the recruiter at that company? And here's what you want to be able to do. You want to be able to call up the recruiter and say, I have what you're looking for. Now, given what I just said about the hiring manager probably didn't write the requirements, that the things at the bottom of the list might be the most important ones to the current hiring manager, that sometimes these things grow over time. I would say I would go for less than 60 to 70%. I would say somewhere around 50%. If you meet those requirements, you should give them a call and say, hey, I meet your requirements. And then you can have a discussion about the requirements that you meet. And then, right, you're talking to the recruiter inside the company. And now it may turn out that the priority is on other portions of the job description, or there's some items that aren't listed on the job description, but it's worth a conversation if you meet 50% or so, if you can get a hold of somebody. And after you have that conversation, then you can decide if you want to apply or not, okay? So it may turn out that the 50% that you have are the most important requirements. And you've just had a conversation with the recruiter and let them know that you have what they're looking for. And so now you're on the inside track. You're on the fast track. And that'll advance your candidacy much quicker than avoiding applying or avoiding making that call. Why do companies hire people? Okay, I'm going to start wrapping up now. I mentioned this before, and here's an example. Brian had a couple of years of HR experience. I think he worked in benefits, and he practiced with the practice interview team. And this job description wasn't even half a page. It was, like double spaced, 2/3 of a page. They wanted 1 year of HR experience in any area and a little bit about the company, and that was about it. Okay, so this is clearly a company who's looking for a relatively inexperienced person, but they're more focused on who that person is than what they have done. Just a little bit of experience in HR was good enough, but what's not on there is the kind of personality they're looking for, and you don't find that out until you interview. But that's kind of what that job description is telling you if you see something like that. This is Rudy Chakrabarty. She worked at Honeywell, big company. She was I don't know what her title was, product marketing, I think. Product marketing was her title. And she had a lot of experience with flow control. So it's industrial applications. This company was looking for a product marketing person for power systems, not at all related. But she had a lot of good experience. She interviewed very well. She had a nice portfolio of things she'd done. And she came from a much larger company. This was a smaller company, maybe 100 people. So when after they met her, and she was encouraged by somebody on the inside to engage, even though she didn't have the major requirement, power systems background. But it turns out that was less important to them than the breadth and depth of her experience and the fact that she'd worked for a name brand company, Honeywell. So they changed the job description, took off the power system requirements, and used that job description to hire her. Now, can or will a company create a job for you? Yep, we've got 3 examples, absolutely. The City of Dallas, USAA, and Broadcom. So in all 3 of these cases, the candidate engaged, this was Monet Schumann, engaged the City of Dallas and pitched to them a role that they didn't have. And they agreed that they wanted to do that. And then they went through the process of building, creating a job description and getting it approved. So City of Dallas and USAA, those were both high-level positions. So that took several months, okay? But they kept the candidate engaged, with the process, and ultimately it came to fruition, and they were hired for brand new roles that didn't exist within the organization prior to them, having an informational interview, having lunch, or arranging to, pitch their idea. Broadcom was a meeting, it was an accounts payable, I think. Yes, accounts payable. So not a real high level position. Oh, and by the way, the City of Dallas and USAA examples for you people who have 20 years of experience, here's how it can happen for you. You bring that kind of experience to a company, they may create a role for you. Now, the Broadcom example is a little lower level position, but it happened through a chance lunch meeting with a previous coworker who was now a manager in the organization. And after having lunch and catching up and realizing that the candidate had some things that Broadcom needed, did the work, got the job approved, and hired him. Took a couple of months, but that's the way it goes. It's possible.
Let's back up a little bit and take a look at how it really should be done if we're doing it. And some companies do this and it starts this way, but it doesn't end this way. So we get the right people together to say, okay, we need to create a job description. There's something new we need. Maybe there's companies expanding, or they need a different role slightly. They need more people in a particular role, so they only have one, but that person kind of gravitated into that role and has been doing that job. Now they need to hire more. So things like that can happen. So we get together and say, well, let's figure out what we need and how we're going to go about hiring somebody. So they really look at the activities and find out, what does this person really do? And how long do they spend doing it? I mean, what's the amount of time they spend doing these things? What's the primary duties and responsibilities that this role should come out of this a little analysis? And also, what authority level, what decision-making capability are we going to put in this particular position? And then let's list our experience needed, our technical and soft skills, education. These usually come under the required, our candidate must have, those types of things. So what are those things that we just absolutely have to have? Sometimes this can be a long list, sometimes it can be a short list. Somebody asked a question about how can you tell if this might be an internal role written for somebody internally. If the essential qualifications contain things that are not necessarily normal for the average person, that might be an indicator that they have taken somebody's specific requirements. They put it so tight that nobody else can fit this because they got to give this job to that person. So that can happen once in a while. But anyway, what are those retired things? And then what are the preferred qualifications? What would we like to have? Gee, we might like to have somebody with 5 years experience, but if they don't, maybe 4 years or 3 years will do. But that's kind of preferred. And then really the last thing they should do is determine the job title, which is fun. If you've ever been in a meeting where you determine a job title, you can understand that this might take longer than all the rest of it because job titles just go all over the map. I had the same job for a company for nearly 10 years and I had 4 job titles, same role. They just changed it. I suggested we have shirts with Velcro on it so that we could put a new job title up there and just paste it to our shirt like the military does on their uniforms. And we can say, all right, here's what my role is and what my job title would be. So that would, but what really happens, and they also got to go through a legal review and make sure they're in compliance with the ADA and EEO for the Disabilities Act and the Equal Employment Opportunity. So now what happens really is generally a corporate recruiter, if there is a corporate recruiting, if it's a company that has one, generally will drive this process. Hiring managers like to tell somebody we need somebody, and when HR says, well, what are you looking for? Then it's hard to get answers and information. So if they get something, then they'll try to build on top of that. They'll edit it more than they actually define it at times. And they may work with a hiring manager. We sometimes assume that the hiring manager is fully aware of everything in a job description, and that is just not true. Some of them don't know everything that's in a job description. Yes, they know what they're looking for generally, but necessarily the job description may not really emphasize the things that they're looking for. There are companies that have more job descriptions than employees. So they build over time and you have all these roles and it keeps building and building and building. And the next thing you know, you got 5,000 employees and 5,500 job descriptions. And so generally agency recruiters are really not involved too much in this process. They usually prepare an intake document. So where they are looking for information from the company and say, okay, here's what I think you need and so even though they have a job description, the saying goes amongst the recruiters is from the research that I've seen on the internet anyway, if you can believe everything there, is that about 80% of what they write down on their intake document does not match the job description. That's a huge difference. Therefore, what's the lesson? You can't depend on a job description. You just can't look at that to say that describes the job completely and fully. I understand everything about it. You really can't trust it, but it is a starting point. At least I have something I can go with that. So I'm going to treat it as the starting point and see how I can go from there. If that's all I have, and that's all I know, what can I do with that? The job description is going to probably generate more questions than answers as to what's going on. So when you're looking at a job description, you're going to be finding out some more details and information about that, just like they look at our resume and they're going to be finding out more information and details about that from the resume. So yes, we got to play the little game of, at least initially, of checking your resume and keywords. All right. This is something that I don't want you to do too much. I don't want to get into resumes, but you can't spend your whole life redoing and having version 75 of your resume. Now you might have some different versions to tailor for sure, but once you get the job description, you can look at the keywords in the job description and see what the keywords are that match. JobScan is one of the tools that you might, I think it's jobscan.co or something like that? Thanks, Jeff, for the nod, and Mark. Where you can put yours in a very, very like a text format in one window, and then the job description the other, and it'll come out with matching words. And I suggest you take, Mark was suggesting, take multiple job descriptions for the type of job you're looking for, and you can put 5 or 6 of them in that window, and then come out and say, what's the most often used things? So you might find the top 5 skills and which ones of those are prevalent. So that might give you some ideas of how you might approach. But the idea is we want to match what they're buying, right, with what we are selling. So we start with that job description. So in my philosophy of what are they buying, it's 3 things. And so I've come up with this idea of saying, what is it that people buy? They want to buy who we are. What's your personality? What are your soft skills? What kind of characteristics do you have? How do you get along with teams? How do you get along with people? How do you get along with customers? That's why they ask us some questions about, how about a difficult time with? And you can say a customer or a vendor or a manager. You can put in anybody you want. And so how do you deal with that? So how do we solve problems? How do we do that? So they want to know about who we are. They also need to know about what we do. A lot of screening is done on the what we do, because they're looking at our experience and our background, our history. Do we meet the education requirements? Do we meet a lot of the things and activities that we'll be doing, things that we'll be responsible for? So a lot of screening covers that, but very little sometimes does that cover the personality and who we are. And then lastly, it's how we can help them. And this is the thing that I see that is probably the most often omitted area in our interviews and our analyzing a job description to find out just exactly what is it we can do for them. This started out back in 2000 when I did my networking. I got into an interview. I got into the hiring manager, was Interstate Batteries, and we sat in a conference room, and he said, well, Walter, what can you do for me? Which was just an I help question. You know, he didn't ask all about my background, my experience. What can you do for me? Well, I didn't have a clue. Not a clue. So I walked out of there. I flunked. I got a G, not even an F. So it was so bad that I said, I got to fix this. And so that got me into this thing of doing the interview success workshop. And how do we sell these 3 things? So how do we find out based on what we know with a job description? So I took a job description, and this is the first part of one that I just selected. It's not everything in the job description. And I said, all right, let me look at this and let me see where the I ams, the I do's, and the I helps might be. So I looked at that one, and so I went through and just took all the soft skills and put them in red. Okay, so leading is one of them. Coaching and mentoring. And interestingly enough, coaching and mentoring is something you do, but it's also a skill. So it fits both of those categories. Communicate. Almost every job description has excellent communications. You are just great writers. You're great presenters. You're great, verbal communications. Well, our resume is going to show them our written skills, and our interviewing conversation, our interviewing is going to show them our verbal skills. So that's how they will test that. But everything generally has some type of communication requirement in it. Interestingly enough, the job descriptions that are very technical in nature, they're just all technical items on there. There's not a soft skill even listed on many of them. It's very interesting. They don't care who we are. They just want to know if we can do it. So sound judgment, critical thinking, leadership, sense of urgency, those types of things I just went through and said, all right, let me find out what those are. Then I went through and said, what are the activities that I do? So these are the things that I do. So I went through and I colored those in this turquoise color and said, all right, what are the things you do? You do these kinds of activities. Then I went through and said, okay, and what's the result of these activities and my skills, my soft skills? And so I ensure this, ensuring that to meet project requirements, ensure successful deployment, things like that. So I just went through and analyzed all the I helps, all right? And when I get through, I've got a resume, a job description that looks like this. I said, okay, now that I've looked at the I am, I do, I help, I go back and let's go look at the I ams. And somebody said, how do you know which ones are the most important? Well, sometimes you can tell by the number of times that word is used in a job description. Leadership is often one that's used. Communication might be one that's used. Collaboration is often one that might show up a few times in a resume. How often is it really mentioned? Just like they look at keywords in ours, we can go back and look at theirs and get some idea. Now remember, you can't necessarily depend on it, but it is a starting point. So here they're looking for multitasking, all right? Lead multiple projects concurrently. So can you multitask? the coaching, guiding, mentoring, communication, the sound judgment, critical thinking. I'm going to pay a little bit more attention to that later. Leadership and that sense of urgency. I've very, very few times seen sense of urgency listed in a job description, but I've seen it many, many times in corporations that says you have to have a sense of urgency about the task and of doing things. I remember in the last company, it did not say deadline oriented on the job description, but I will tell you that was very, very sacred in the company. We met all of our deadlines. They were absolutely critical to do that. Very, very high on the priority list. Here's all the things that you do. Here's the activities. And then doing those activities, here's all the things. So I kind of made separate lists and said, all right, now I can talk about with them the things that I can help them do. So they're selling me or showing me what they're buying by saying, can you do these things that yield these types of results? So I'm sure that if you know anything about project management, everybody does on budget, on schedule, and on time. So, I mean, within budget and schedule, budget and quality, whatever. I can't remember the third one all of a sudden. But nonetheless, if you say that's what I do as a project manager, that I'm on budget and I'm on schedule, that all project managers do that. It's the results of the project management that are going to make the difference for us. So as we look at project management and we see these things here, these are the things that I can say back to them about my activities as a project manager that yields value to this particular role. So I'm going to do a little timeout here because I think this is very important. I'm seeing these three things show up on job descriptions, and I'm seeing also a lack of good communication skills to talk about in our interviews what these things are and how we use them. So diversity and inclusion, critical thinking, and emotional intelligence. So since they show up, I want to do a little sidetrack on that. Now you might want to take some screenshots or come back and look at this later because I'm going to go over these pretty quickly. So diversity really is, do we represent the same diversity as the community in the corporation? HR is very, very much involved in diversity, filling out the reports, making sure that what we're doing and what we look like, how all that matches. So they report a lot of it and show a lot of that information. So they generally will have a statement at the bottom that talks about we don't discriminate with all these protected categories. Inclusion is very much a leadership involved activity because leadership was the one that says, do the people on the team feel like they belong? All right. I was talking to a manager and I was doing some consulting and I said, I've just talked to your team members and they say that you don't listen to them. And he said, well, I do listen to them. I absolutely listen to them. I said, then why do they say that you're not? Well, it comes down to his definition of listening was hearing what they said. And their definition of listening was you don't do anything different with the information that I give you. So there's a different perspective. And so do they feel like they belong? And how do you make them feel like they belong? Because you will do some of the things. You'll listen to their suggestions and ideas, and they will feel like they are an important part of the team because they are contributing. Critical thinking. The thing about critical thinking is I'm concerned that the interviewers don't know what it is either. I don't know how many people really understand that one, but really it's an unbiased process of trying to take facts and data and evidence to make a decision. So it's objectively. So here's the tough part. We all have biases. They're inside of us, and we have to figure out what they are and how do we remove those from making these decisions. So our personal feelings, opinions, and biases. So we have to recognize that in others as well as ourselves. Now, that's not an easy job, but that's what it's all about. If you want to talk about critical thinking, you can say, well, let me tell you what I think is important about critical thinking. And the skills that I have is I'm able to identify that situation, that problem. I'm able to complete and do the research, make some inferences on things that may not be all complete in data, but I can understand how to interpret that and make some inferences. I know how to look at biases and see different ways of seeing people's different perspectives, figuring out that what data is relevant and what's not relevant. And I always keep this idea of, I'm very curious about everything and I want to find out. And so I ask a lot of open-ended questions. So if I talk like that, saying this is how I apply critical thinking, you're going to be way ahead of anybody else you probably will wow them because they don't know what it is either. And then lastly, emotional intelligence. That's really the ability to read others. Some people are looking at emotional intelligence as the one key to success in a role. Without it, it does have some merit to say, if you can't understand others' perspective, you can't understand where they're coming from, you can't understand that, you can't very well communicate with them effectively. So in any communication, it would be great if we understood their frame of reference. Whose frame of reference are you usually in? Are you patiently waiting for them to finish so that you can correct them and tell them what it is? Are you going to repeat what you said because they disagree with you? And since they disagree with you, they must not have understood. So you're going to tell them again. Is that the way you're going to approach it? Or are you going to approach it from an aspect of saying, maybe their idea is better than mine. Maybe their idea has merit. Let me pause. Let me think before I pass judgment. So something like that, I think, would be great for you to talk about when you're trying to explain how you use and work with others to adjust your behavior so it's effective with them. So it'd be good to keep those in your STAR stories. Somewhere in there, you can talk about where you use inclusion, where you use critical thinking, where you use emotional intelligence. All right. Lastly is you take the job description. Here's another way I suggest you might take it and look at it by saying, all right, everything on the job description has one line per item. And I put that down on the left, all right? Then I say, now what experience do I have? What background do I have? Or is there some education involved? Or are there certifications involved? What is it that I have that says I've done that kind of thing before? And what's the value that I can bring to that? So if I've done this kind of, I have this kind of soft skill, how is that soft skill related to a particular achievement that I've made? Then from my library of STAR stories, the situation, task, action, result, when they say, give me about a time when you promoted continuous improvement of service quality, productivity, and customer satisfaction. All right, well, then I can have a story that goes along with that particular item. You don't have to have a different story for every item, but you need to have a story for every item, all right? It's just like you have to have a reason you left every last company, even though they might not ask you each one, you still have to have a reason for leaving that. So if you kind of put it out in that fashion, you've done an analysis, taking the job description, and a lot of that should come from your resume, your background, your history. You should have all that kind of prepared, ideally. Then when you get to the job description, you should be able to fill this in fairly easily. Now, it's a lot of work and a lot of time to do that. So I ask you this, should you practice today? Well, of course you should. Even if you don't want to, you should practice today. Even if you feel uncomfortable, you should practice today. Everyone who has practiced, and Mark can bear me out with this, that's come through the pit crew or come through the interview success workshop, have all said, I'm glad I did. This was worthwhile. I've learned something. This has helped me. I remember Jared, he wanted to get into Lockheed. I don't know how many times he came to pit crew, 6 or 7, came to the interview workshop, 9 or 5, he practiced and about 4 or 5 times with me. I know that even Jeff was on one of his panels when he interviewed Jared. And he got the job, and he announced it and said the real interview was very, very easy compared to all of these. Well, why do you think that was? It was because of all the practice that he had accomplished. So go through the practice. Come on down. We are on your side. We want to help you. Step out of your comfort zone and put your learning hat on and say, I'm just here to improve my skills and do a better job. And we are here to help you do the same thing.
All right, that's the presentation for the day. If anybody has any questions, you're welcome to unmute your mic. You're welcome to ask away. Walt's with us if you have any questions. Questions. There was one comment. Bob put a comment in the chat box regarding a vague or out-of-date description. If the company is using an ATS, it sounds like you might be in a bit of a guessing game, and that is true. That's why if you fill out an application out online, the next best thing to do is to now reach out. Who can you find in that company who can help get your resume to the HR or hiring manager? Any questions, any comments?
While somebody may be thinking of the questions, I'd like to talk about what % of the job description should match before you ask or request or follow up for an interview. Now, in the chat window, we had 4 or 5 responses, a D, B, and 2 C's on the percentages, where D is a higher percentage in those choices. So I think there's 2 parameters that we want to ask ourselves in saying, when should I apply, and looking at the requirements. Number 1, is it a target company? Is this a place where you want to work? If it's a target company, then I lower the percentages of matching. So you can get in the door, you can talk to somebody, you can sell your value, you can find out maybe there's other opportunities or so into the company. The other thing is do you want this job? I mean, you haven't had experience in a lot of it, but maybe this is still the kind of thing you want to do. And if that's true, I still say, well, if that's true, then I think I like to do these types of activities and do this kind of work. Then you want to prepare some questions like, tell me what a typical week would look like. What percent of my time do you send me spread across these activities? And if they come and say half of your time is doing this and you've never done it before, that's a significant mismatch. But if the priorities and the top requirements of the things you do have experience in, then the strategy is I can pick up the other experience. I can do that. Now, it's not how you handle it in the interview to say, I don't know this, but I'll learn it, because people don't want to hire you to train you. But at the same time, you say, I think I can pick up those things, and those are the kind of things I want to do. So if you meet that, you can lower the percentages. I would say, if anything, on a targeted company, 50% is easily the threshold, easily. If it's a job you want to do, that's easily the threshold, at least 50%. But then find out what the main thing is. I saw a job description that was 3 pages long. And the responsibilities, there's about 40 listed of the things they were responsible for. And I said, okay, it's obvious that I can't do this the whole time. I got to prioritize these things. So I need to ask. So I saw all these job duties and responsibilities that you're looking for. How would you suggest that a person to be successful in this role, where should they spend most of their time? What are those 3 or 4 top things that are important to you that I should be doing? Then you can weed that down to saying, okay, here's how I can help you do these things. So any questions or comments about that?
Questions, comments? You're welcome to unmute your mic. Well, I guess not. Well, Walt, thank you very much today. Thanks for being with us. For everybody else, just a few last slides and we'll get out of here. Be sure to join Career DFW and Career USA. We're putting on training 4 days a week. Let's see here. Tomorrow, being the 5th Thursday of the month, I'm going to do a presentation on successful job searches. Focus on these 4 areas. 4 areas of your job search you need to focus on. So you join me tomorrow, being the 5th Thursday. Otherwise, normally the 1st and 3rd, we do resumes. The 2nd and 4th, we do networking. But because there's 5, we're going to talk about successful job searches. This Friday at the North Dallas Plano Career Focus Group meeting, we had a great presentation with Mike Chapman. The 10 new things you should know about health insurance for 2023. Mike has been helping job seekers for years and years. If you're unemployed, I've known him for probably 15, 20 years now, and he studies up. In fact, he's just finishing up his courses this month because as of October 1, the new insurance portals all open up. So he's going to share the top tips that he's learned over the last month of training that we should be aware of for next year. So join us tomorrow, Friday morning at 9:30. Next Tuesday, our presentations with Terry Sullivan, how to create a LinkedIn brand, and tells you key contacts, who you are, what you do, and how you can help. The event will not be recorded, so if you want to see Terry's presentation, you do need to watch it live. And then next Wednesday, we'll do session number 6, interview openings, closings, and follow-up. Interviews, openings, closings, and follow-up. For those people who, they've talked about the 13-part workshop, all these seminars, all these workshops are on the Career USA YouTube channel. The first 5 sessions, as Mark mentioned, all talk about what do you do before the interview, preparing for the interview, star stories, how do you handle everything, analyzing the job description as we talked about today. The next 5 sessions are what do we do during the interview. So next week, we're going to do interview openings and closings, which is session number 6. And then the last 3 sessions, some advanced topics on how to, just other things that, you know, what to do during the interview process. All of them are on the Career USA YouTube channel. This session has been recorded. It will be there. This is, if you go to the Career USA YouTube channel, click on playlist. And then at the very bottom where it says view full playlist, the best thing to do, click there, the green arrow, and then you can go down there and you can scan and find whichever topic is you'd like to go back and watch. They're all up there. We have over 400 videos on the YouTube channel that you can watch. If you're not receiving emails about our workshops, you'd like to join the Career USA mailing list, please send an email to careerusa, subscribe at groups.io. You'll never be spammed, but what you will get is the topic of the day, the title of the day, and most importantly, the Zoom link of the day. That way you can grab your lunch, grab your breakfast, and click on the link and join us for our session. Please remember, Career DFW, we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Mark's a volunteer, Walt's a volunteer, all of our speakers are volunteers. I'm a volunteer. Everything I've done over the last 14 years has just been to help you land your next great opportunity. So thank you for joining us today, everybody. Have a great Wednesday, and we will see you all hopefully tomorrow or later this week.
Thanks, Jeff from